Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today what I want to go over is the 3G and 6G alternator upgrades for the Foxbody Mustang. These came with what's called a 2G alternator that are only rated at like 65 amps at full output, and at idle that is a lot less. Around 800 RPM, one of these cars only puts out about 30 to 35 amps. So that's if you do very many upgrades to your car, like contour fans or fuel pumps, stereo, a lot of other stuff, that doesn't put out near enough amps for that. Contour fans alone draw like 60 to 70 amps. An aftermarket fuel pump like the one I have in this car, which is a Walbro 450, it draws like 26 amps on its own, just a single, and I've got two. So it adds up pretty quick, and the factory alternator just isn't going to cut it. So what I wanted to go over is I see a lot of guys where they'll just buy an alternator, a 3G alternator, and they'll put it on their car, but it's just great. You know, the 130 amp alternator upgrade is a real popular one, but they don't really go over you know, the ins and outs of that. Like if you hear somebody say it's a 130 amp alternator, you think that's what it does all the time, and that's not true. At idle, it doesn't put out anywhere near 130 amps. I've got on this car now a 6G alternator that is 110 amps, and they use those on like 03 Mustang, and Taurus used it. That's compatible with one of these. It'll bolt right up. Same style ears on the case. What I got for it to put in its place is a 240 amp 3G alternator, like what you'd find on an SN95 Mustang. So at idle, an alternator only puts out, if you're lucky, about half of its capacity. But like I'm going to show you here today, it's not always the case. Unfortunately, I don't have a 2G alternator to show you, but I've got the 6G. I'm going to show you it, and I'll show you what my 3G that I'm putting on here is. And that's kind of the bad thing about these. A lot of people think that they just put out a half of their rated amperage at idle, but I'm going to show you it just doesn't happen really. The 6G alternator I'm taking off and the 3G I'm putting on really are within like less than 10 amps of each other, and the 3G's peak output is rated for better than twice what the 6G is I'm taking off of here. But I had some issues with the 6G, and I just wanted to go to a 3G. It's a little bit easier to get a hold of if I ever need to get it rebuilt or anything. I feel a little bit better about doing that one myself. The regulator, you can get to it on the outside of the case and stuff. So that, and it's black. I kind of wanted to black it out, so I went ahead and got a 3G to put in the place of the 6G. The only reason I even had the 6G on here is because back when I had my On3 kit, the case size is physically smaller on a 6G. And I'm going to show you on the bench here in a minute, side by side, and we'll look at that to actually physically see next to each other the differences of them. But a neat tool that you can get is an amp probe, and if you notice, it has two different amp settings. So if you want to try this on yours, just to see, you know, to check to see if your alternator's good, you need to measure it in amps, obviously, and volts. So but if you go to buy one of these, you want to make sure that it has the ones in white. That symbol is for DC amperage. You have to make sure that the amp meter you're buying is for DC amperage. A lot of them, cheap ones, will only read in AC amps. So but you can find these pretty relatively reasonable. With this one's a DVOM and amp clamp, and I think I gave like $50 for it online. So they're out there, you can get them. It's a really nice tool to have. A lot of uses you can do. You can check your amp draws for a lot of things. But so let's get right to it and get this finished. So another thing I wanted to go over, I did, while I was doing the swap with the 6G alternator, they're set up a little bit different than the 2G, like what's on the car, and a 3G. On a stock Mustang alternator, like what you have, and a 3G, for the regulator, it has two wires feeding it on the smaller plug in the back. Actually, there's 3 wires total. The white's the stator, but the only 2 that really get hooked up, there's a, on my car, it'll change with the year, there's a green with a red tracer. That one runs up to your dash, okay, through your forward lamps harness, your front end lamps harness. It'll run around the front of the car and then up into the dash, and it goes through a bulb. And if you ever notice, when you turn the key on, the little battery light will come on. That should always come on. If that doesn't come on, that means the bulbs burn out, or there's a resistor inside there that could possibly go bad. I've never seen it happen, but I'm sure it could. Or the printed circuit board will go bad. And with my 6G, it didn't do that. It was all externally regulated. Internally regulated, so it didn't pass through there like that. So the alternator always worked. I never had a problem with it in that aspect of it. So I went ahead and I did the swap from the 6G to 3G, and the alternator didn't charge. So I didn't have power on the green with the red tracer. And I checked it back to the dash, and I found the printed circuit board that your bulbs and stuff go into. That copper foil had deteriorated where the bulb was and where the connector goes into the back. So I had to order a different cluster. I got one off eBay, and I just broke, because I have 160 mile per hour motorsport speedometer in this car, and the gauges and stuff are really good shape. But the one I got had a perfect the printed circuit board on the back, but the gauges weren't really good, and it just had the stock stuff. I think it even had a 4-cylinder tach, but you can convert all that over. There's plenty of videos. I didn't film it to show you, but and I went ahead and put LED bulbs all in the dash and stuff, so I had to swap that out. And I also found I had a bad connection. I did a wire tuck on this car, and there's a connector that green with a red connects to. That would usually be on your inner fender, and on this one it's on the inside. It also has, I think, a low coolant sensor, like for a GT. If you'd have that in your overflow tank, that wire runs through there, and the fan for electric fan, if you have a 4-cylinder car, is in that. So really on mine, it's an LX. So the only thing that ran through that connector on mine that didn't end on the other side of the connector was the one for the regulator. So I just checked with a test light, found I had power on the outside of the firewall, but I didn't have it up in the nose of the car. So I have something else that's really good. I recommend if you can get one. This is the Ford factory shop manual, the actual one they used at the dealership. I bought that off online 10 years ago, back when I first got this car. I've got the big mechanical shop manual too, and they're great, and you can pick those up. I think I gave like $20 or $25 for it, and it's got all the connectors, the test procedures, and all the wiring for the whole cars in that book. So helped me out a bunch figuring this out. I recommend you get one for whichever year. But yeah, I just wanted to go over that and kind of tell you what was going on with that. So that's why this video took so long. Is my car was charging really fine, other than some minor issue, but and I put that alternator on and it wouldn't charge at all. So one thing led to another, and I had to buy a cluster and fix that. So just wanted to go over that and let you know. All right, guys, welcome back. Got the alternator sitting out here. This is the 6G I just took off the car. This is the 3G that I will be putting on the car. You can tell just by looking at them side by side. The 6G case is a little bit smaller, which, depending on your application, you might have to have. More likely, though, you can get away with one of these. the pulley. This is the stock style pulley, so you can kind of see this is the overdrive pulley. How much better or smaller, I should say, this pulley is. Just makes the alternator spin faster. The faster the alternator spins, the faster it gets to peak output. So you put an overdrive pulley on, so at idle it puts out more amperage at idle. The other thing you're gonna need to do, like I said, this car's already been upgraded with the 4-gauge cable over to the alternator. It's what I took off, and it's already had the plug put on it for 6G. So I probably won't leave it this way, but for right now, I got this adapter plug. I found it on eBay. That's the name of the company I got it from, right there. I got it more than anything because I wanted a good plug that had the stator wire already in it. I didn't want to have to, a lot of them you see, they'll give you this piece and they'll give you this, and then they want you to connect them with a butt connector. You can solder it together, but I really like the way that this was done. It looks factory. So eventually I'm going to take this off, but for right now, I'm just going to plug this into the connector I already got. So this is like what you'd find on the back of the alternator. So it's going to plug into what I have on the car. And then this is just going to plug into the alternator that I'm putting on now, the 3G. This is a 300 amp breaker. It's going to replace the 150 amp breaker that's on there now. So it's something you got to remember to do. Just put the appropriate size breaker on the car for the alternator you're running. Well guys, there it is. As you can see, either way the alternator puts out 60 to 65 amps at idle, which I've got this, it idles pretty smooth. It idles at like 950 RPM, which, I mean, it's not a ton. I mean, it's not as much as I'd hoped. I was hoping I was going to get at least like 70 to 80 amps anyway, but it'll put out more if I had the idle turned up. But I like that 950 RPMs is kind of where I want it to be. They tell you that anything over like 1200 is where it'll come up over 100 amps, 1200 RPM. So it's not like the car sets and idles all the time, but you definitely do want more than the stock. But alternator, or the video ran a little bit longer than I wanted. Like it's probably going to end up at like a 14-minute video, 15-minute video. So I'd like to went over the wiring and stuff, but there's a ton of videos out there, so it wasn't really meant to be an install video. It's more meant to be a why and an actual what the alternator is doing type of video. I haven't seen one of those. You can search and find the videos for wiring the pigtails up to plug it in. Like I think I put in the video, it just takes a little bit of wiring. You're going to need to run a 4-gauge battery cable. The orange and blacks aren't going to cut it for the bigger alternator. You'll end up burning those up. They couldn't even handle the 65 amp alternator that came on this, and then it's just connecting the yellow to the yellow and the green with the green on the small plug for your regulator, and that's pretty much it. As long as you're using an aftermarket bracket, use a stock bracket. Obviously you don't have to trim the bracket out. If the case is too big, it won't fit. But hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something. If you liked the video, give it a like. If you didn't like it, obviously, we'll try to do better next time. But thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.